I read The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead, and basically it's a story of a girl named Cora whose grandmother was captured in Africa and brought over to be a slave in America. And she had 5 children, but only one of them survived, and her name was Mabel. Mabel was Cora's mom, and Mabel decided to run away from the plantation, but she decided that she had to come back and get Cora, so on her way back, she got bit by a snake, and she died in the swamp. So then Cora was basically an orphan living on the plantation by herself. And then a fellow slave named Caesar convinces her to run away with him because he respects her determination and her bravery. So they run away, and by means of the Underground Railroad, they end up in South Carolina, and her and Caesar are given false identities, and they get jobs. They like it so much that they decide to let 3 trains come in and out of South Carolina until they learn that a runaway slave hunter knows where they are. So Cora, she can't find Caesar, so she goes to Sam's house, and Sam is the one who gave them the fake identities and helped them get into South Carolina. So she finds Sam and tells him, and so he hides her in the Underground Railroad station under his house. So she's there for a while, and then she hears a mob come into Sam's house and set it on fire. And so then she's down there for 3 or 4 days, and then eventually another train comes by, and she gets on that, and it goes to North Carolina and drops her off at like an abandoned railroad station. And then a man finds her and brings her home because he was one of like the former workers of the Underground Railroad that used to be there, and they hide her in their attic. And the wife begins to read the Bible to Cora and stuff. And then one day, Ridgway, which is the slave hunter, he comes in and he finds out that Cora's there, and he captures Cora, and they stone the couple that took care of her. So Ridgway captures Cora, and then Cora finds out from him that Caesar was beaten to death back in South Carolina. So they're on their way because Ridgway needs to capture another runaway slave in another state. So he brings Cora with them, but with the help of some freed slaves that she meets, they help her escape from Ridgway, and she runs away with them to a farm in Indiana, which is like a little community of a bunch of other black people. Some were freed and some were slaves, and there was like some unrest as to whether they should let the runaway slaves live with all the freed people because it was making the white people angry. But then Ridgway finds her anyways, and he comes in and he shoots a bunch of people. He shoots the people that helped her escape from him the first time, and then he captures Cora so that he can return her back to Georgia. But she actually escapes from him. She wraps the chains around his neck and like throws him down some stairs, and Ridgway dies, and she escapes, and she finds some older black men on a wagon, and they're headed to California. So she gets a ride with them, and then she goes on her way to California. One literary element that is used very effectively by Colson Whitehead in The Underground Railroad is figurative language, which is basically when an author uses descriptive words and metaphors and similes and just different things like that to help the reader understand the message he's trying to convey and to really picture what exactly is going on in the story. And so it helps the reader to have a deeper understanding and a better connection with the book and with the story and the characters. And in this book, Whitehead uses it very effectively to show Cora and her life experiences and why she acted the way she did and why she did the things she did and how she went through different situations. And it just helped the reader picture it, because if a reader can picture something that's going on, they automatically have a deeper connection with it, and it helps them to understand like why the character feels that way, and it makes the book overall a better book. Some examples of Whitehead's figurative language one being is in the beginning of the book when they're describing Cora's grandmother's death. They describe the cotton like white caps on the blue ocean, which just makes you picture like this vast sea of cotton, and just her grandmother just lying there, on the ground helpless. She can't do anything, and just like how the waves beat upon the shore, like the cotton beating upon her grandmother, just like showing how she'd been treated her whole life, and now this is where she ended up, like just in a cotton field alone and dying. And it just helps the reader really picture what angered Cora, like what made her so mad about this, and it helped her to understand Cora's real like motivations throughout the whole story to get away from slavery and to run away because she didn't want to end up like that, and she didn't deserve to end up like that. So it helps the reader to understand her motives and just gain a better understanding of Cora's feelings towards them. A second use of figurative language by Whitehead is when they were describing Ridgway, who was the runaway slave hunter. They say that he was 6.5 feet tall with a square face and a thick neck of a hammer, which just makes you picture Ridgway as this huge, intimidating man, and you can understand why Cora and all the others were so scared of him and were constantly trying to run away from them, and why some of them wouldn't run away from their plantations because of fear of being captured by this man, because he would torture them, he would mistreat them, he would beat them, he would kill some of them. Like, he could do literally whatever he wanted because he was in it for the money. And the use of the comparison with the hammer also shows how he came down on the slaves like a hammer. He really was, because he would beat them, he would misuse them, treat them, all of that stuff. And it just, like, you can picture this hammer just beating into nails and stuff. Well, he was beating into them in a way. And it makes him all the more intimidating, as if he wasn't already intimidating enough. A third example of figurative language that Colson Whitehead used is whenever Cora walks into the doctor's office and she's describing the microscope she sees. She says that they squatted on the tables like black frogs. It just shows how uneducated, in a sense, Cora is because of her slave life and how she lived on the plantation, and just she didn't learn these things. And so she sees something like a scientific tool that was common to other people who were like free and who lived in society, and how she didn't even know what it was. And she described it like a frog, something in nature, something that she knew, to help the reader like see like how she was feeling, how she was lost in the society because she was kind of sheltered in a slaved world, and she was never allowed to learn. She was never taught anything, and now all of a sudden she's in this big world and she doesn't understand these things, and she's trying to make her way in the world. And that's just one instance of Cora showing how her like uneducated background is going to play into her life in society and what happens to her. So Colson Whitehead, his use of figurative language is what really helped make the book an effective tool for him to get his message across to readers. He was just trying to show the horrors of slavery and how awful it really was. And without the figurative language, a reader wouldn't be able to understand that. The language just shows like how bad things really were and what people had to endure, and it makes the reader have sympathize towards the characters in the story, and then realize that actually happened in real life, and that we can't let history repeat itself. It really paints a picture in the reader's head. And because if the picture can connect and can understand and can like relate on a personal level with a character in a book or with the book as a whole, it leaves a greater impact on the reader's life. And the more you impact your reader, the better your message is conveyed. So the figurative language was truly like the most impactful and the most important thing that Whitehead used. He also used other things as well, like characterization, setting, narration, personification, all of that. But the figurative language is what really stuck out to me when I was reading it, because it helps me understand what was going on in the book and how the characters felt and just what they were really going through in life, and made me realize that we can't let that kind of thing happen again. The descriptions of Cora and her life experience allow the reader to feel like they know her, and if you feel like you know somebody, what happens to them is going to impact you a great deal, more than if it was just like some stranger you heard about like on the news or something like that. So when Whitehead like gave us backstory to Cora and gave us backstory to Ridgway and backstory to like her grandmother, her mom, Caesar, Sam, everybody, just the stories he told about the other characters allowed us to understand and relate with them, and that wouldn't have been possible without the use of figurative language, because the reader wouldn't be able to understand what was going on, or would just get like, it would basically just be a basic summary with no real descriptions, and that then no personal connection would have ever happened. And in order for the reader to understand like their personalities, because they're all so different, and you can't understand that unless you really read into it and you see all the descriptions he uses, and you don't even realize it when you're reading it, but afterwards you realize how much you know about the characters and the plot and the story, and you realize it's because of the figurative language, because it lets you paint a picture in your head, and the story just moved along inside of your head.